Hey, everybody, welcome to third episode of Unification Party here. A look at politics and what's going on. We basically just had the coronation of Carney, and I guess we'll get this episode started with let's have Adrian here tell us who this Mr. Carney is, and we'll go from there. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Jay. Yeah, thanks. Once again, so looking into Mr. Carney, he's a Canadian-born gentleman. He with quite the record, quite the history. And to quote his own words, he's not the first time he started at the top. He's done quite a few prestigious things, as most Canadians know him as the governor of the Bank of Canada, as well the governor of the Bank of England. Prior to being the governor of the Bank of Canada, he was working as one of the Liberal advisors in the finance ministry, and he's educated at very prestigious institutions. He's got a doctorate of philosophy from Oxford. He's also went to Harvard. Um, Interestingly, born in Northwest Territories, I believe Fort Frances, and went to elementary school in Edmonton. So, I mean, me and him share that in common, our time in Edmonton, our little brief time by the looks of it. His dad actually ran for Liberal MP in the 80s in Edmonton and came in second place. He is he's a man with with a lot to say about, but also not at the same time. Like, since he's in those bigger halls of power, it's not as though he's out in the public eye all the time. I think my first introduction to him, like more to see him speak, was I believe it was last year or 2 years ago at Davos when Yavi Yemeni caught him on the road there and asked him a few questions. And personally, like, he seemed like a very charming man who wasn't answering any of Yavi's questions, any of his questions. So I will say he's very polished and very statesman-y. He's been on many different boards, professional and non-professional. I believe it looks like he's big into the WEF. He was their climate envoy, UN climate envoy after he left the banks. He also has he's prestigious. I believe he sits on the board, or maybe he stepped down from his time at Brookfield Asset Management. That's where, like, his current standing with, like, finances, just from looking into it right now, it seems like there's a lot of gray area. He's a hard man to sort of say, like, kind of nail down. I know, just for fun,
Would you
like a month.
say
Sorry.
would you say that it's because just the type of stuff he does isn't news, or does it seem like more sinister, like the available internet has been scrubbed of any sort of negative or that kind of thing?
Well, on that note, I know, like, 3 weeks ago or so, me and my friend were having a talk about net worth of him, and we just Googled him, and then we Googled Pierre Poilievre, their net worth. And I mean, just at first glance, like, I mean, you hear celebrities talk about that, like it's never right or whatever. But first glance, Google was like Pierre Poilievre's worth 26 million apparently, and Mark Carney was worth like under 4, according to like the first glance of Google. Just so far as, like, to your point of the internet being polished in his favor. Um, yeah, I mean, it could, it's definitely a bit of that. Like, I mean, there's just no way you could
But
walk into.
I don't mean something super sinister. I just mean he's very, like, with the establishment, well respected inside those sort of halls of academia and economic academia and finance, I guess.
Yeah, I would say if you looked establishment up in the dictionary, he would probably be there with a picture of him. Like, his textbook that, like, I mean, going to Harvard and Oxford for your education right away, regardless of how that was paid for, how he got in with grades. Like, I mean, he probably is a very bright individual. But I mean, even to be able to afford those schools as a bright individual, you have to have some credence behind you. And I mean, he was the youngest ever bank central banker. president of a central bank of a G8 and G20 nation. So I mean, like he has some, so to say, gravitas behind him. Um, I know the English aren't like super stoked about him because he was there during Brexit and whatnot. He wasn't, I think, a big fan of that. He warned about that. But I mean, like, you can't really blame his warnings, like the guy or not like the guy. When he
Sorry,
warns
explain
that,
that.
like,
Explain that better. He warned against Brexiting. He
yeah,
was okay.
yeah, yeah, he warned that there would be economic uncertainty and there would be ripples and possible recession in certain areas if there was Brexit. Which I mean, to be honest, like Brexit, like Mark Carney, whatever, that is true. Like when Brexit happened, obviously there was the EU is different than England leaving the EU. So obviously his warnings were not like unfounded or nefarious.
Right.
Uh, and same with Canada. Like like he took over in '08, which was during the great financial recession. But at the same time, one thing I always knew as Canadians is like out of the G7 during that '08 financial issue, we were the best out of the top seven for like stability with housing prices and banks not going under and so forth. So, I mean, I'm sure he had his hands full when he took over the bank, but at the same time, like comparatively, it wasn't like the house was out of order with our nation.
So so it seems like he has some legitimate like wins. Like he's been competent in some tough times and faced some adversity. That would be fair to say. Whether you like him, dislike him, not important.
Yeah, well, and that's on that note. Like, I do believe at the leadership, when he was elected there, he told the crowd in Ottawa that he was going to scrap the carbon tax. And I know during his leadership race there over the last month for the Liberals, there was a couple of times he was caught saying something, and then like obviously that wasn't the truth, like getting caught lying basically. And when it comes to the carbon tax, like he has been a proponent of like ESG and like pricing on carbon, and so to hear him go back on that, you're just kind of like, what's going on? Like, I don't know. Like, you don't have to. I don't have to agree with you, but I do like people that are principled, and it does seem like he's willing to like throw his principles out. Which I mean, maybe I do respect people who change their mind. I just can't help but be apprehensive due to the, quite frankly, like lack of information about him, like in the real world. Just because the halls he walks in are so up and far away from the common man. It's not like they're reported on and published daily. And
No, but it's no secret that he sits on the WEF board, and it's no secret that he's big on environmental issues and like these types of things. ESG. These are no secrets. Like he's
correct.
more of the same of Trudeau. He would espouse the same same beliefs and all those things. Is that not the case?
I have to assume so. He was Trudeau's financial advisor for the last few years. Like, and the way that worked is like he was hired by the Liberal Party, so he didn't have to like disclose certain things. There was like another little loophole that he like fell under for declaratory purposes. So I mean, he's certainly an interesting person. What I would say of what he represents for Canada, I mean, the leadership election of the parties, they're all individuals. So the parties make their own rules as much as we'd like them to be more democratic. But there was a lot, like they disqualified 2/3 of the votes for their own leadership race. And the leadership race, you could have been 14 years old and you didn't even have to be Canadian. And a lot of people were getting disqualified for trivial little things. Like they put their name down as Jen, but legally it says Jennifer on their ID. So, and then there was some stuff with those two Liberal candidates getting disqualified right after pretty much they came up with the 350 grand to run, and the party kept the money. So I don't even know if Liberals are too happy because I assume the mainstream media in Canada is happy because he's basically Trudeau 2.0 relatively, like he's a part of the boys club. But supposedly there was only like 2,000 people at the Liberal election in Ottawa, and they even had like John Chrétien there, and like you would think in Ottawa, a very Liberal favorable district, you could muster up more than 2,000 people to come out. We're hearing that same day, Pierre Poilievre just had a run-of-the-mill get-together meeting in London, Ontario, a much smaller town than Ottawa. And actually, maybe London might be bigger. Actually, Ottawa's not massive, but nonetheless, he had apparently 2,500 people out, and he didn't have Chrétien there or Harper or anybody that.
Don't you think even, I mean, sure, okay, Pierre's got a couple of more people there, but don't both of those numbers sound extremely low? Like low energy? Like, are we just like, um, because of America, the big brouhaha that we just went through down there, or I don't know what to compare this in the past to. Those both seem like low numbers to turn out to something like that.
Well, I would agree that they're both not like massive, but I would agree the significance of what the Liberals were doing versus what Pierre was doing is like on a different level.
No. I mean, I get the message it sends that there's more excitement for the, the Conservative Party energetically out there now than perhaps the Liberals. But I mean, the newspapers are telling us a different story, but that's so impossible to figure out. So, what do Carney's? I mean, I know the cheerleaders are going to say Carney's got the experience. Carney's he's dealt with these kinds of things before. I'm sure he can put a resume together, which you've demonstrated. That's all nothing but good news. What do Carney's detractors say about him?
Well, on an extreme note of the internet, it looks like there's a few pictures of him with infamous Ghislaine Maxwell, and a lot
Okay,
of people aren't too stoked about that. I mean, that
that's
that
weak.
is
That's weak, though. That's weak.
well,
Like that's weak
I agree.
evidence. Like in and of itself, that's nothing. I've been to a party and I could have
I
stood beside somebody, and a couple of photos does not.
I
Like
agree.
you'd need more than that.
I agree. Well, like I said earlier, like the fact that he's been campaigning for carbon taxes and ESG for almost a decade, and then the minute he becomes prime minister, he said no carbon tax because he knows it's not popular. To me, it just seems like he's going to be another snake oil salesman. Like he's going to do what he needs to do to maintain his grip on power. I will say, I think people are like some smarter people assume that he's probably going to call an election within a fortnight, but about 2 weeks' time, there should be an election so that he can earn his mandate. Um, I would assume he's probably going to wait for a unifying moment based upon something from the president of the United States to gin up support.
Yeah, but I
Uh,
mean, how long does he have to, like, how long is the actual election time? So, like, he can't call it for like a week from now. Isn't there some sort of protocol? Like, he has to call it, like, is it 60 days notice for the other parties, or do you know what the rule is on that?
I'm not certain about that, but I know that he's not even prime minister just yet. Like he's in waiting for that. But I know I listened to I believe his name's Dan McTeague. He used to be high up in the Liberal Party. He was getting interviewed last week, and he put his money on he'll be doing it in about 2 weeks' time because he wants to earn the mandate from the Canadian people to govern, which
Right, but
is
that's a risky like gamble. If like you could be riding a high, but you got to call a 60-day election, then anything could happen in that time. So
yeah. My money would be on, like I said, he's going to use some saber rattling from the south to try and ride the wave high. I think that it would be difficult for him to govern respectfully, um, as it stands, because he's arguably been handpicked by 130,000 random people on the internet to be our prime minister. And like for example, like the Liberals, you didn't even have to pay any money to join the Liberal Party to make that vote. Like I said, whereas the Conservatives. I think Pierre was elected by over 400,000, and those all the people that voted in that election, I think they paid $5 or $10 to actually join the party. Which I
So
mean,
does this sort of seem like, I mean, it's almost like a parallel story to the American election. You've got, I'm not going to compare the two, but just the story. You've got the more populist Pierre or the populist Trump. You have the party in power, the Democrats, for us the liberals, and then they have to change their incompetent leader Biden, we have to change our Trudeau. And so they inserted Kamala Harris. And here we've sort of inserted Mark Carney. And then now we're going to go into election here. That sort of seems to be a parallel.
Well, and I was thinking about what that says about
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm
state.
asking you, I guess.
About
What do you think that says?
personally, what I think that says about the state of the Liberal Party in Canada and perhaps even the West is that it is not doing very well. Like they've had power for a very long time. People are kind of getting sick and tired of it. Like the veneer is wearing off. So they elected a man that can take the hit, ruin his reputation, and like go off to one of the other two passport countries he holds and like live wherever he wants to live. And like if it does, for example, like not work out for him to win the next election, I think they picked a man who can afford to lose with name recognition.
Okay, so let's say he does lose. Do you see him being a type of person that sticks around to rebuild the party?
No, not at all. Maybe,
So,
but I doubt it.
but he, so then if, again, I know you're speculating and this doesn't mean anything really, but if you believe that he wouldn't stick around, then that says for sure he has, there's a belief there that he can win. I mean, I would assume he would want a majority government. Like he wouldn't be shooting for, oh, I'll just be a minority government, right? If he willing to take the job and that he knows an election is imminent, it would reason that he believes he can win a majority government. Would that not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because he's also not a sitting MP, which is fine. You would think that like I would actually like a guy outside of politics. I like people outside of politics going in and shaking it up and keeping them on their toes. But I mean, it would be hard pressed to see him staying and going into like the House of Commons and like fighting with Pierre over things when like he could just go sit on the beach. Like,
Yeah, but they all could do that. Trump could have gone and sat on the beach. Elon could go sit on the beach. Zuckerberg could go sit on the beach. Bezos could go. Like, there's certain people who are just not. It doesn't matter what they have. They're not going. They're just not going to go sit on the beach.
no,
So I mean,
I
you
get
got to
that.
think like he's got this incredible resume. When he agreed to take the job, before they got the boost, and before we got this Canadian nationalism boost as well, all 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 polls pointed to like a decimating, like maybe the Liberals won't even be a federal party next election when he's playing with the idea of taking over. So that seems strange to me that a guy that's not going to, that you say is not going to stick around with the party. That seems strange because he agreed to take it over at that time, or was playing with the idea when that's what it looked like. And then by the time this whole thing started, then there was a resurgence in, the Liberals brand because this, anti-American, pro-Canadian stuff has been happening. But he started back when it looked like it was assured loss. So
That's true.
I do find that interesting. He didn't get on board the change train. Like he got on when it was like it hadn't even started chugging along, like way back.
Well, and he has been off and on working with various liberal governments for over a decade. So I just think like I could see him reverting in a situation where Pierre wins a majority and like say like a clear majority. I just couldn't help but see him after a few months of that going back to his normal role of like advisor and like
I
somebody.
I I don't disagree with that, but I'm still making the point that he must believe, based on his past, a guy like that doesn't go to lose, right? I would imagine he must believe in his heart of hearts that he can win, or he wouldn't have even started this, even when it was doom and gloom. That's all I'm saying. He wouldn't have done it based
I
on
I
available evidence.
I agree with that sentiment, right? Like for sure. But at the same time, I also think that like he is the type like it's not like he could lose and like his life isn't a loss. Like he could still go on and do
No,
other
no,
things.
but for sure. But he clearly, I would say, again, neither of us can know his thoughts, but I would say he believed he could win, or he wouldn't do it.
I agree.
If he's not a builder, he must have believed that he could win. And so I'm just saying that I don't know what that says exactly, but that's something at least to recognize. That's interesting perspective.
Well, and considering the lens he's had to look at, like the inside of the political movings of Canada, and then prior to that, the insides of the financial movings of Canada, and like even with his company Brookfield Asset Management, like he's well versed in the goings on of the major power places of Canada. Like he's no.
And he will have the media, like he'll have the Canadian media. I don't mean in his pocket where he's giving them the words, but they certainly won't put him through the ringer.
Yeah, no, the
So
Canadian media loves the Liberal Party, that's for sure.
right.
Um,
So maybe from what he knows, the inner workings, what he knows from some sort of you know expensive polling firms whispered in his ear, in conjunction with the sheer will of the media to have anybody but a conservative government. Maybe he knows or thinks that's enough. Even when it was doomy and gloomy, he was like, that is enough to change the narrative, and even in as little as 2 months or 3 months, or what now has been. I mean, he got a free month to kind of campaign. I mean, even in the debate, nobody like Christian Freeland didn't go for his throat, or nobody else went for any. I mean, it was all like pretty much
he's
a handshaky debate
he's the
club.
he's the godfather to her child.
Yeah. So
It's a big club, and we're not in it. Um, yeah, I do think he'll definitely know what to say on the campaign trail. Personally, I think since he's been in those certain positions, he's definitely culpable for some of the issues in Canada. So I certainly think he's smart enough to know what needs to be done to fix a couple of things. So I certainly think during a campaign, so we've already seen him in 1 month get caught in a couple different gray area fibs, so to say. I don't think it's anything for him to fib a little bit more to get back into office. So I agree with you. I think he believes he can win, but it's just a
well,
matter of when would he call the election. I mean, I think sooner than better for integrity. But like at the same time too, it would be kind of I don't think he's going to want to go too soon either, right? He's definitely going to want to pick his window because, like you say, there's some rules. They have to get proper notice and stuff like that. But I mean, he's not an idiot. That's for sure. He's definitely a smart individual, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. Like, I would love to have my foot in my mouth on this man and be proven completely wrong on my presuppositions about him.
well,
I'm
he's
just
got.
not.
I mean, if you're right leaning, he has all the right credentials to be a globalist evil villain, if that's how you want to frame him.
Correct.
So, but we should give him the benefit of the doubt until such time as he tries to make us eat cricket sandwiches
Well, the big one for me
at the
is
end of a
like
stick.
is like he seems to be like super capitalistic when it comes to his money, but not when it comes to other people's. Like his companies invest in pipelines all over Africa and South America. They ship Canadian coal to China. Meanwhile, like he was a huge proponent of us all getting dung at the gas pump and on our propane heating. So it just
Well,
seemed like rules for us, but not for him.
and I know there was some talk that his companies, they moved their management office to New York City, and he claimed that he had nothing to do with that decision. And then there was seemed to be some evidence that he had sent a memo to all the board members to, or the shareholders to, or something to the effect. He didn't seem to be telling the complete truth that he had
Correct.
indeed been a big part of moving his head office to New York City.
One thing I think will be interesting about him is like I remember reading this book back as a younger man called Blue Trust. It was about Brian Mulrooney's tax attorney. and just like the inner workings, like because like I remember, if you recall, back when Paul Martin was prime minister, he got a lot of heat for being an owner of that big shipping company, and I think it was like third largest in the world or whatever. And it'll be interesting to see like how he handles that, because it's just like clearly there's a track record of prime ministers not really maybe respecting that separation when they are elected and avoiding that conflict of interest from their companies. And I mean, it's quite odd conundrum I could see to put somebody in, but I mean, he seems to be a little bit more entrenched and all over the place than just like ships and just like I don't even know exact that much about. I mean, I read that Blue Trust book 2 decades ago as a young man, but um, yeah, it'll be interesting. He is quite the character. I mean, I honestly think like if he didn't look like such a supervillain, like I think he does have all the makings of possibly a good prime minister. But he kind of reminds me of anything, kind of like a little bit of like Emmanuel Macron, just like former banker, and clearly the big boys like them, and they don't want to overturn the apple cart, so he's their man on the hill.
Well, I looked up I'm just looking at it here now. I know he wrote that book called Values, Building a Better World for All. And basically the key themes are, I get really quickly go over it here, just looking, it's that society needs to not prioritize money so much, but a values-led economy where business go beyond profit maximization to solve societal problems, ESG scores, like you said, corporate cultures rooted in integrity and trust. Basically, the book builds on these ideas from transitioning from more to a more moral from market sentiments. It's been praised for its ambitious vision, but also criticized by some for being overly idealistic, or basically classic left-wing ideology, wishing that everything would work out to be a certain way. But I mean, it seems to be in his own words. That's what he's saying. Again, doesn't make him a villain. He probably has convinced himself he's going to change the world and do good while he destroys it around himself with insane policies.
We're all the good guy in our own story, and that
Exactly.
it's very easy to have millions, hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever, and be like, yeah, money's not that important. I do agree,
Yeah.
money is not number one, and people do get that confused. But that did remind me of one of the big things he was a proponent of was getting off the U.S. backed dollar being the world standard for trade, and like maybe going with some sort of there's an abbreviated term for it. I can't remember, but like it's a central bank digital currency, but it's like almost like a Libra, like some new currency that could just be a synthetic currency that could be created that we could use for trade instead of having to rely on the American dollar. So, I mean, I I will say if he is still a fan of that idea, I don't know what Mr. Trump's going to think of that. Like, I don't think he's going to. I know he's not going to like it because he already
Well,
was crapping on the
out
Brexit.
there right now. He's very, like, from what little he's saying, he's really playing up this nationalistic thing, and he's very anti-Trump right
Yes,
now. I don't think you can go 2 seconds without saying Trump's name in a speech. But
it gave
so
me
that's where his
flashbacks
focus is.
it gave
Well,
me flashbacks of the sitcom where you'd see the person jokingly run for politics and just be like 9/11, and then everyone would just go
yeah,
crazy like, woo! Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
it kind of seems like that, and you can't blame them for using the Trump scare card. It works.
No. Well,
What were you going to talk
interesting.
about today?
I'm going to talk about, I mean, I want to talk about what Trump's doing with these tariffs. And then I want to get back to you based on what you've said about Mr. Carney. After I sort of talk to you about what I want to talk to you about, I want to talk about what do we think, or how do we think Mr. Carney and Mr. Trump are going to get along. But we'll save that for a few moments. I thought it was interesting. I mean, obviously, you saw, like, even just moments before we came on the air here, Doug Ford saying he was going to turn the light switch off to upstate New York, and then Donald Trump was going to double the tariffs on aluminum and steel at 50% starting tomorrow morning. And then Doug Ford pulled back and he's like, whoa, whoa, no, I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to go meet down in the United States. And they called us. And Trump said, no, no. Doug called them. And it's a little bit of a he said, she said, but they're basically seem to be doing damage control. But none of this matters in and of themselves. They're just more of the same. I wanted to go back to something we were talking to a little while back, and that was that document that we were talking about, which was a user's guide to restructuring the global trading system. And I was having basically AI summarize it here, 41-page document that seems to be a key document that's been tied to Trump's real plans, as opposed to his critics calling him, again, like we spoke about, he's a madman, it's chaos, he doesn't know what he's doing, whatever. This seems to be basically what I'm saying is if you assume this lens, which again, I'm not saying is the correct lens, if you assume this lens, everything becomes a lot clearer about what his plans are. So essentially, the main factor behind this paper, this 41-page paper, this document, restructuring global trade, is that America has been footing the bill on trade imbalances since the end of the Second World War. It obliterated American manufacturing. And then this document explores various tools, including tariffs, currency policies, with the idea of rebalancing trade while minimizing adverse effects. But the main issue was tariffs as leverage, and basically was saying tariffs are proposed not only as a revenue source, but also as a means to negotiate better trade terms and encourage currency adjustments in trading partners. So essentially, that seems to be the key point of this document. And I know when we spoke, even before we started this show, I had indicated to you we both had read this document or had referenced this document, and it seems to be that like the ruse of fentanyl, which many people have said that's an excuse to get around the law, and the ruse of porous border, they're not the issues. The real issue here is the negotiating use of these tariffs, but also the reality that tariffs are coming and they're going to be retaliatory unless there's complete free trade across the board. And when you look at it through that lens, that these tariffs are coming, plus, and not like, two ideas at the same time, and that they're a negotiating tool to get better terms to that end, then everything that Trump's doing does seem to make a little more sense. Like, put the tariff on, pull it back. Look, Doug Ford comes in a little tougher. He goes a little tougher. They pull back. Now Doug Ford kind of seems to be on his back foot and would be kind of just be happy if it was just the 25% tariff that was going to be originally. Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to make sense of it, because if you look at the talking heads on the television, the only story they're telling is one of a kook. He's just kooky. That old Trump. Him and all his brilliant geniuses around him. They're just a bunch of kooks, and none of this makes any sense. So I'm not saying my perspective is right, but there seems to be evidence that this type of tariff negotiation and external revenue generation is here to stay. And he even escalated, Trump escalated his conversation today that, basically saying that any major retaliation or turning off the lights, his response to Canada would be like something we'd write about in the history books. So, I mean, that's a pretty shots fired, eh?
Quite the statement. Quite the
Yeah,
statement. That's for
yeah.
sure. But then to Trump's credit, where he's like, he's a charmer. Like when Doug Ford pulled back, when Trump was talking about it, he was like, they got a smart guy up there.
Oh,
He was a
he
smart
said
guy.
specifically a strong man.
Yeah, yeah. He was complimentary. Like he knows how to play ball. Like it doesn't. We don't have to always be throwing fists, but if we do, I will. I would rather be throwing compliments your way. But I mean, I would love to know what Trump even thinks about Canada. Like, I mean, it is what it is. But I do agree. Like, I think that's all a part of Trump's plan to like bring manufacturing back to America and make the American middle class great again.
And I have no doubt that he covets Canadian resources because like I was doing a bit of research before the show here, and basically Canada has 34 critical minerals. In every province territory, we have mines, smelters, and the ability to work with metal like across the entire country. Canada is considered the metallurgist and miners to the world. We're like we world leaders in that. Lithium, nickel, copper, cobalt. Uh, we supply 30% of the world's potash, and 80% of US's potash, which is basically fertilizer for everything they grow. And 80% of the world's tungsten, it comes from China. And if China has already started to turn the tap off on tungsten, and tungsten, I guess, is needed for all the hard metals when you need to like pierce with missiles through like tanks, and it has, strategic military um, use. And 80% of the world's tungsten is manufactured and dealt with in China. And apparently, we have one of the largest tungsten mines here in Canada, up in the I don't know, it's up in the north somewhere, but we got lots of tungsten. So there's some talk that
You forgot
Trump,
uranium.
yeah, of course, there's
You
the
said
list goes
we have a
on.
lot.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So those are just a few of these, pretty big numbers, plus our oil, gas, the list goes on. So it seems plus the strategic importance through the Arctic, plus, but there seems to be a never ending list of reasons why, through economic persuasion, Trump might want to force a more, uh, I don't know, a unification of some sort, essentially. So this all of this points to this idea of raising revenue against trade partner and enemy alike, uh, for the benefit of the USA, plus the strategic importance of us militarily, plus the strategic importance of us when it comes to critical minerals. Like when you put all of those together, it seems that there definitely is a concerted effort to. This is going beyond more than just jokes about and his disrespect for Trudeau. I think there is a
Mm-hmm.
concerted effort to. I mean, which we both have suspected to begin with. Thus, the nature of our unification party is to proactively deal with this real threat as opposed to reactionarily, waving a flag and waiting for the inevitable hammer to fall. But
Yes. Maybe.
essentially,
So
go
it's
ahead.
almost like you think like he's almost using this barrage at first to kind of come in so that when he like maybe tries to force us to go to work, where it's like, hey, how about you just open up your resource sector and maybe I'll let some of this stuff go. And maybe because if he initially started off with, hey, why don't you start mining more, people would have been like, that's crazy. But if it's kind of like, oh, that's all he wants us to do, we'll just have to remove some environmental regulations and we could go to
Yeah,
work. I mean,
yeah.
it's not crazy. I mean, at the end of the day, we do have a lot in common. They're our brothers and sisters. Like we're as much as England is our mother country, we have more in common with the average American than we do with the average English
No,
person.
but okay, but let's say tomorrow, even with the USA's $36 trillion debt, tomorrow you have to make the decision. You're now, you were the deputy prime minister of the unification party. We did win majority government. I died of a heart attack. You are now making the decisions. Would you even consider trying to tie your wagon to the European Union over the United States? Like,
Absolutely not.
of course not. No sensible thinking person would think that that was the answer. I mean, I would love that. Wouldn't you love to be able to just like travel all through Europe with our new, European Union passports? That'd be great. But
I mean, I wouldn't even have wanted to have done it in like the 1800s when Europe was prosperous and we weren't. But in
yeah,
simple geography, it's like to quote The Simpsons, it's the Milhouse effect. Like they live right there. Like
yeah.
we're just, it's just a no-brainer as well. I mean, it is interesting to see all the the way the Europeans are reacting. I mean, that's a different story in and of itself. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, especially because like we said, like Mr. Carney is not an idiot. We might disagree with his worldview, but he's not a dumb person. And if they have him and Trump sit down, I mean, it's been 10 years of awkward relations between Trump and the liberals. It'll be maybe it can't hurt. I don't think he's going to do a worse job than Justin did.
No, but okay, but let's say okay, so let's take Carney at his word. So his own book, which is all about ESG, climate justice, uh, leftist ideology to the extreme. So that's his game. Well, forget about his. We don't care that he has pipelines in Zambia or whatever, but we know he's 100% against them here in Canada. So I'm going to assume he follows through. Everything is going to be green to the extreme, ESG to the extreme. So you could argue that that's definitely going to be anti-business. Then America is 100% not bluffing with tariffs. Like it's going to be a real and present threat, always hanging, always pushing, always pressing. So what businesses are going to come to what is already perceived as anti-business Canada, and what businesses that are already here, if they even have a hope of escaping, will not escape? Like,
No, you're right. No, we're already losing that battle. Even under Biden, we were losing businesses going and investment. It was going south over us. And then you throw Trump, who's substantially more business friendly than Biden, it gets even more attractive. And then we're running the other way with it. Yeah, whatever does come here, like I mean, they're actually going to have to start doing business. They can't just run on government subsidies and handouts. Like I agree. Like I mean, obviously, I don't think businesses operate effectively when government's handing them out money. I think government makes a better referee than they do an owner of a sports team, so to say, to use that analogy. And it might force our hand to actually take a page out of their books because we're going to see success going on, like whether how you want to measure that. And it hasn't been going on. Like you could see the gap between Canada and Americans over the last 10 years. Like you see that graph. And we're like when 2008 happened, we were like better off than the average American. And now we're substantially worse off. And that wasn't 2008, sure, it was almost 15 years ago. Well, it was over 15 years ago, but it wasn't that long ago for that in that amount of time for that gap to widen so far as it did. So I don't know. It'll be. I honestly just can't see it working the way the current government in Ottawa wants to do it, and the way the status quo has been in Canada for so long.
yeah, but I mean, how can a guy like Carney, who's a banker and obviously he went to smart school and he knows how to work
His hedge funds done
spreadsheet,
well, right?
a
Yeah,
spreadsheet or something, and he's got a slide rule and an abacus and all the tools at his disposal. What how do the I just how is it paid for? What's the is it I guess it's these carbon taxes, it's these, you know, in just constant steady stream of increasing taxes, I guess. I
yeah.
guess what
Which
else
is
can it be? but people are working less. Like you have young men escaping the workforce. Look at us; we escape the workforce in the traditional sense. There's thousands, tens of thousands of us, millions of them in the United States, underemployed people who just,
lie down.
you know,
They call it in
yeah,
China. They're lying down,
yeah,
lying flat.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree. Like,
so
and
you've
that's
got,
where
yeah,
I can't see it working. Like I've been saying for well before Mr. Carney showed up on the scene as a face man of the Liberals that like the problem with left wingers when they're in charge, they don't quite understand how money is made. They just know it's there to be taxed.
yeah, but that's, I mean, come
But
on.
we're dealing with 20 years of that type of government, and then
I know, but that's
yeah,
such an easy, like clearly, like I said, these guys got like maybe not Trudeau, the drama teacher, but Carney's got a calculator. He knows how things work.
he runs the hedge fund, Brookfield Asset Management. He's not an idiot. He knows what business is.
Right.
He's not. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And that's
So how can he think like, oh, forever we can do this and then that's going to happen? He must have, like, he must believe that there'll be like a resurgence in AI or green technology, or Canada will be like, he must have some sort of, even if it's unrealistic, some sort of dream about what the solution would be. I know we'll hear, I guess maybe we'll have to wait and hear what that is when he actually is running, when we actually have the election, I suppose.
well, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has an ace in the hole, like because
Well,
he's
that's what
again.
I'm getting at before when I was talking about, like, he seems to have, like, we've determined that he wouldn't, again, which is not true necessarily, but we determined he's not the type of guy who would come, take the loss, and slowly rebuild the party as his legacy. That would be somebody who's had medium successes and was willing to put in, but he's had some huge successes.
Mhm.
That's not his style. So that's what I guess is an interesting thing. What could we hypothesize? Let's not even bother, because it would just be uneducated, whatever. But it's
He
interesting to
certainly
think that he seems to think we've determined that he could win, and we've just by accident discovered this other idea that maybe he has an ace in the hole. But I guess we'll
he,
have to wait and see.
agreed. He is certainly smart enough to fix Canada. Like he has that. He's not an idiot. I will say that much.
But you could be blinded by ideological capture.
And I would agree with that. But the fact that he said no carbon tax as soon as he was elected leader, and everybody in
Yeah, but
Ottawa cheered for him.
Yeah, but he'll just call it some other thing. It'll be the, clean energy, anti-tariff, global support fund or something.
Yeah, and that's probably my lens of like of being a fan of smaller government, that I can't help but see that be the remedy. So, and I'm sure that that probably is not what he has in mind, but maybe. But
So let's just say, so Carney, we'll take him for who he is, but we won't put any conspiracy theories on him yet. We'll leave him alone with just, he's a good dude with lots of good resume, who just values social justice above all and is just here to right the ship in the stormy sea against the evil, chaotic devil man from the south. That's him. Okay. That seems to be what the narrative is right now, by his own words, right? Every time he's talking, Trump's a terror, a chaotic terror. And so we take Trump, what we believe at his word is that Canada sure would be nice if it was part of the States. We want Greenland and all that Arctic area, including Canada, for defense. We like all our minerals. So he's going to want it. Carney is like not even interested in talking about playing ball. So what does that look like for the next 4 years?
I don't think it'll be 4 years because I do believe he has to call an election by November.
No, but I'm assuming that Carney's got in. He's won. So 3 months from now, Carney's the prime minister. Trump's got, sorry, only 3.25 years left on what is the next a majority liberal government, so Carney
Gotcha.
can do his Carney things, and Trump is going to do his Trump things. What does that look like?
I mean, it would just be hypothecating what it would be, and you have to go down. I mean, according to his own words, it would probably be there would be some sort of central bank digital currency. There would be a lot more ESG. There would be a lot more taxes on energy. But again, like maybe he's gonna prove us all wrong and find a happy median. Because one thing that's kind of always got my goat about like the left wing environmentalist movement in Canada is they really don't like Canadian resources, but Canadian companies have to follow all these strict laws that these fine folks have got implemented. So you would think that like out of all the resources you'd want to buy Canadian resources because they at least followed the rules that you people have implemented, as opposed to buying them, like they always say, lithium from a child mine in Africa or,
Yeah,
whatever, right? Like Saudi oil or this, that. Like, why not buy ethical Canadian oil? Like, I know the oil patch is very, very polluting. I'm not denying that, but they do have to follow certain rules and laws that these companies where we currently get our resources from don't have to follow. So it's kind of always
yeah.
seemed
There's
like
a
talking
well,
out of both sides of the mouth.
but that's, I mean, that's for every issue across the board, right? Like we allow immigration, but we brain drain the countries that we're bringing the best and brightest from. Like how does that make sense? We're like, oh, we're going to support our aging population on the backs of uh, people who were paid for by other poorer countries to be educated and raised to. We used to want to bring families here, but now they decided, oh, we can not only get them after they've gone to university in their home country, we can get them beforehand they come here, and we can charge them for university here and get that economic benefit as young people. Like, this is not to the benefit necessarily of poor people we drag here and the countries that we rob of their young talent. Every leftist policy and every rightist policy has a counter side that's antithetical to it.
No, for sure. And I think if, let's say, for example, Mr. Carney is willing to roll back on the carbon tax and maybe he's willing to turn a new leaf on the Liberal Party, like I've actually had thoughts in my head over the last 10 years because I still consider myself a classical liberal. I feel like the left moved away from me. I never moved away from it. I feel like I'm more or less the same guy I was politically 20 years ago as I am today. And maybe not 20 years ago, I'm not that old, but at least 15. And it wouldn't be that hard. Like, all it would take is like a liberal Western democracy to just move closer to the center. Because I feel like for years, most people were always like fiscally conservative and socially liberal, where it was like, we don't mind helping the guy who breaks his leg at work, but we also don't want to pay him to play Xbox. And we also don't want to do it on the credit card.
And
So,
not forever, yeah.
right. So it wouldn't take too much to bring back common sense while still maintaining, like, not even to say modern left wing dogma, but like 8 years ago left wing dogma, kind of going back to that. And that could kind of like, get walk back to the center. And
Well, it was interesting to see that. I didn't quite catch all of it, so I apologize to any of our viewers if I'm not getting it 100% correct. But it appeared that Pierre was speaking about Canada having a golden age and becoming one of the wealthier countries in the world, and pipelines and zip lines and jumping castles and all of the above was in the cards. I got to look further into it before I speak too much on it, but I hope that that's what I understood was what I saw is what is happening, because that's exactly what we do need. That's exactly what we need, is not a Carney like shake your fist at Trump, but a complementary, um, you know, complementary strategy to make North
a storefront.
America, yeah, like a powerhouse. I mean, my mind couldn't even imagine how much of an economic powerhouse Like it would almost be the existence of it would just be unfair to the rest of the world.
If we
But I
joined
but
for
I'm cool with that.
if we joined for sure. But I would also say like even just a government coming into Canada, like us saying Canada getting a golden age, it's not like we're like Andorra. You know what I mean? Like we're a massive country that with a rich, you know, culture and history, and there's a lot of potential here in Canada. And I think that's the saddest part about the uh, the economic malaise that we've had for the last couple of years is that like we actually it's not that we are like we have the potential to be great. We have the potential to be a strong powerhouse of a country, and it seems like we've turned ourselves into a bit of a joke. And it kind of seemed like back to '08. Like I remember feeling proud about Canada when we were like when I found out as a younger man that like we got out of the great financial '08 recession stronger than any of our counterparts because of the resolve of our Mark Carneys and our Stephen Harper's, like are those people in those positions, our central bankers and our politicians, like keeping the rules and having the trains flowing and showing up on time and everything. So it wouldn't take too much to get back to that. And like we have the potential and the means. We just need to like get the government off our necks.
Well,
Oh,
I guess as much as I despise how the Liberals acted over the last bunch of time, I'm trying really hard to not like to give Carney a fair chance, like to hear what he has to say. Uh, but
yeah.
I do envision that if Carney keeps up with his bravado, and we don't need to put a word on how Trump is, he's going to do what Trump do. There can be nothing but fireworks there. Like, so I don't know. It's only going to be who will back down first, I guess. I'm anticipating ultimately. See, but I was thinking about this the other day. I know we spoke about this last week. As much as, of course, Canada can't win in an all-out economic trade war, but it doesn't necessarily have to win. It only has to win the hearts and minds of like a decent section of the United States population with the help of liberal media. And
That
it only has to affect the stock market enough to make everybody in the United States a little bit nervous. So,
well
maybe it's not as futile an endeavor to make a lot of noise as some of our leaders are.
that approach reminds me of what the Viet Cong said about beating America. Like we can never beat them on the field of battle, but like if we could win the hearts and minds of the people in back home in America, we could let them beat themselves. And I mean, but I will say, like Trump starting his term as presidency, you have 4 years. You're going to want to do the hard stuff right away, so that time passes to like let things change like you want them to, and maybe the good stuff starts to show as well. You're going to start doing some better stuff near the end to try and reinvigorate your voting block so that your party can win the next election. So it'll be interesting to see. But if Trump's plan is to like reinvigorate America, I just think it's smart for Canada to say like, how do we help you? What do we need to do? And I honestly think, well, like
100%.
like we could if that's removing tariffs, like we'll have to figure that out. Like it's a no brainer. Like we're brothers and sisters. We're set up already to help them, but it just seems like there's some things wonky with our tariff system. And I think most Canadians, like for example, you always hear about that 290% tariff on dairy, but and the Canadian dairy cartel. So obviously those folks aren't going to be too stoked about that
Yeah,
little
but
system.
see, but okay, so just for funsies, I heard today on the CBC that 290% tariff on milk or dairy product is like there's basically it's a tariff that's never been charged. I mean, which I then would counter then why is it even there? But
Mm-hmm.
there's not the tariff. Like that's an exaggeration of the dairy tariffs, and it's not a true representation for a bunch of reasons that I can't remember that they explained,
Okay.
right? And
Well,
and that
I
the
was going to
quotas
say,
and that the quota system in Canada is not about milk tariffs so much. It's about controlling the supply and demand.
mhm.
And so there were. I'm not saying the counter arguments were correct, but I'm just saying there were people giving counter arguments to, and were claiming that those claims of 250+% tariffs on dairy were unfounded. Just to
Well,
throw out there.
I will say personally, in the future, if there's a day where there's free trade and I go to the store and it says Canadian milk $6 for 4 liters, American milk $3 for 4 liters, it's not because I'm proud to be Canadian that I'm going to buy the Canadian milk. It's because American dairy gives me gas. Like they have that like Monsanto growth hormone where the cows produce more pus, and their dairy's just no good. So like it's one thing. As much as I don't like big government or this dairy cartel, I still like Canadian dairy. But you know what I mean. And I think a lot of Canadians like would vote with their wallet when it comes to things like that. I don't think
Yeah, I'm not arguing any of those things. I'm just saying is there are tariffs in place. That's just a fact.
I think like
And
anything
and people want them gone.
for sure. And
And
we're just the little guys. So like whatever happens one way or the other, Carney or Trump or us unifying and all that, I think at the end of the day, it's all going to come out in the wash for the common man like us. I really think the only people who are going to lose in any of this, it's just going to be the established oligarchies in Canada. They're going to have to like sharpen their pencil, which they haven't had to do for 30 or 40 years.
well, I guess we'll see what happens. Well, that's all. I think that's a pretty good take on what's happening so far, and we'll tackle some other issues in a couple of days from now. I
The next
will
time,
talk to you later, buddy.
take
Bye.
care.